Hi there. Welcome back to Maybe Actually Museums Are For Me. Today, I am thrilled to share our interview with Renelle White Buffalo, an extraordinary artist who primarily works in acrylic and collage, and she also dabbles in printmaking. One of Renelle's works, titled Skyshaw, is on view at MAM until January of 2025, so she's an exhibiting artist here. So I won't spend too much time delaying the interview, but I want to say that I met Renelle for the first time a few weeks back. We were filming an artist profile for her, on behalf of the museum, and she very, very kindly invited me to her studio in Jersey City, where I got to not only chat with her and realize how interested I was in having her on the podcast, but also I just got to see her at work, which was just such an incredible honor. Renelle creates these like abstract and wildly colorful paintings which play out for the viewer almost like one of those ink blots you'd find in like a typical therapy scene in a movie. Maybe they're real. I don't know. I feel like I've only ever seen them in movies. Although Renelle will tell you that there aren't any hidden images within the strokes which bleed down the canvas, she will tell you, however, that a lot of her work is land-based, as in she's painting landscapes in an abstract and completely unique way. She presents the viewer with the chance to observe the world, land, and water, among so much else, with a fresh interpretation, which personally, I've never seen before. Her style is just so individual to her. I, if you haven't been able to tell, am quite in awe of Renelle's work. I think she's fantastic, and I am so thrilled to share with you our chat. So, without any more pause, here is that conversation. Hi, Renelle.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. For those who may not be aware of your work, we've gotten to know each other pretty decently from working together a little bit on some other projects, but can you just let the people know like who you are, what you do, what you create?
I'm Renelle White Buffalo. I grew up in South Dakota, but I live in Jersey City now. I'm an artist who does printmaking and painting mostly. I use collage elements in my painting as well. And I work at Mana Contemporary Studios. And I'm Native American, Lakota. And so a lot of my work is cultural based and land based, and kind of like, I guess, my story of like how I grew up, but in an abstracted way.
Mm-hmm. I definitely want to talk about your style and the abstract landscapes that you just kind of spoke to. But first, I'm always curious. Did you always know that you were an artist, or was it something that kind of came later? Like, how did art come to you?
Yeah, like art's always been in my life. I've always like had a creative spirit, and I love to draw and paint things. Like, I would love to decorate my grandma's house, and I would always switch it up and change it up, and she would just let me do whatever I wanted, basically. And I've always like wanted to do art, so that's always been a thing.
You're Lakota.
Mm-hmm.
Is art a very influential and important part of your community and that culture?
Yeah, I think growing up, like, it was never like shunned upon of like, oh, she's going to be an artist or anything like that. Like, it was fully embraced. And before even I was like, oh, I could be like a graphic designer. What can you do in the art field that like can create income?
I know that feeling.
And so I always thought that way. But like everybody else, in the community was pushing me like they're like, no, you could be an artist. And then it kind of even was emphasized in college by some of my professors that like, no, you can make a living like doing art. And now I see like a lot more people. We always had beadwork people, people that bead, people that sculpt. And so I feel like art is very much embraced in the culture. And
so you grew up in South Dakota. When did you decide to move away? Because I know when we first met and we were first chatting, you told me about that you lived in LA and you've lived in New York, now obviously settled in North Jersey. But What was that decision like, leaving South Dakota?
I've always wanted to move away.
Fair enough.
I grew up so like poor, and so like I just always wanted to have a life that like was the opposite of that. And so like I just thought that the only way that I could do it was if I moved off the reservation, but I feel like that's not true now. But as a younger like kid, that's what I thought. And I also wanted, to explore the world and stuff, and I didn't know that you could do that from the res, but I know that that's not true now. And so like I knew I have to go to college. I have to do this. Like there were certain steps that I had to take to get off the res and like explore the world. And so, yeah, and I always wanted to live in a big city. Like it wasn't just moving away. I've always wanted to live in New York or LA or like somewhere like different.
Yeah.
And I love it just because it's so convenient. Like
Yeah.
So now I guess my motives for like being so far away from home is like not the same that it was then.
Kind of in the same vein though, when you were kind of speaking to being away and stuff, I was kind of thinking about there was this I recently went through like a kick of reading a lot of like Ernest Hemingway, and in one of his books, I think it was like a collection of short stories, he wrote about how he struggled to write about places while he was there. And so like, he could really describe like, the wilderness of, insert place wherever while he was in like a cafe in Paris or vice versa. Or I guess like as you've been away, do you think being away has helped you kind of create art around those places? I mean, I know a lot of your art is land-based, and, I guess I'm curious about what you think about.
I guess there is like the truth to that, because I feel like the further away I went was like the closer, not only that I became to my culture, but also my connectiveness with the land. So so that sense is true. There's only a few like land-based pieces that I've done that weren't like South Dakota based. I did do like one piece from when I went to San Sebastian. I loved this bay area. And then there was another Italy portrait that I pulled from too, that I have two paintings that are not like, they're totally not South Dakota, but they also have that familiarity of South Dakota. Like the one that I did that was based off of a picture that I took in Italy. It was this random road that we went on, and it led to, in Puglia, and it led to this like cliff, like water hole thing. And it had familiar colors to it. It had familiar like plants to it, and it was totally different, but it made me feel like at home. So it was really weird.
It's always strange when you can like pull connection from something and like feel like, this is like a kind of a strange one, but like every time I'm on like a train or something, I don't know if it's like something with like the gears or the wheels or the tracks, but like I always smell some sort of scent that I can only pin to like my late grandmother. And so it's always interesting where you can find, little tidbits of something that can like almost like bridge those like connections that you almost thought were like lost.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so interesting. Whenever, I hear about somebody like figuring that out, like in your case in Italy, connecting it back to like where you grew up. But can you talk to me a little bit about your color palette? It's amazing. It's great. I'm really curious about your use of blue, especially in Sky Shawl, which is on view here at the museum. Is there anything to that, or is it just a really pretty color, which I know is also a very valid answer?
I've been really into the blues lately. And that vibrant blue is not, I try to shy away from like the stereotypical landscape colors, like the greens and stuff. I do incorporate those colors, but it's not it's not heavily used as much as like, like a traditional like landscape piece. So the blue is something that you would see, I feel, in landscapes, but it's just heightened more. And it's just, it's not the blue that you would technically see in like maybe the sky that you think of, but
it's like the most, it's the most perfect, like if everything from lighting to no clouds to maybe you're near an ocean, like it is the most like, just like pointed blue, but it's so like, I don't know, it just scratches a weird itch in my brain whenever I look at that work.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's and it also is like a color that I like. So after I did that piece, like I painted my nails that color. It was like all immersed. But a lot of it I think is like colors that I love.
Yeah.
I mean, you can find a lot of different colors in nature, so I could always bring it back to that point, but at the same time it has to be a color that I like.
Yeah, you gotta want to use it.
Yeah.
In that work in particular, but all of your work, the paint really, like, it feels like it's like dripping, whether that's, from like flowing water or blood or whatever. It can kind of, especially with what colors you're using, it can really point you in different directions. And I know that when we spoke, you said it's kind of almost a false battle trying to like find imagery in what you're creating, because it's if it's there, it's purely coincidental. Like I know when we were talking, it's like you were like, see, people say that like that looks like a bird. It's not a bird. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like the almost like dripping or running paint that works like the one on view here at MAM has, like, where does that stem from? Is it just a style of yours? Does it come from something with more like meaning? Like I think it's so beautiful.
It was like styles that I grew up like loving, like different paintings that I liked that had like that kind of like drippy effect, because I like the painterly like styles. However, like when I was I think in college, I just remember a professor saying like, don't, like, the drips have to like have a meaning, and it kind of like, I don't know, there has to be more to it.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. And so it's actually not drips, it's like it's pulled all the way, the paint is pulled all the way down, so it's not even like it's the paint runs. And if it does, it's just an accident that I just let it go.
Yeah.
And like and I try to make it like strategic to the point where like with the sky shawl painting, like I think of like the fringe on the shawl, and I also think of like when the so that's for like the dancing series, but then there's also like series where like I think of, how like the cliffs have these deep roots that like kind of go down and kind of pull the earth into a cliff.
Yeah, I know. I totally, I know it might not look like it from my nodding and my staring, but I do know what you mean.
So that's kind of what I think about as well in terms of like just dragging that paint down.
Yeah. You spoke today with the docents here at the museum, and as someone who's worked closely with the docents and filmed a lot of videos with them where they ascribe their meaning to the work and talk about it, and especially, as we just spoke about, there's plenty of meaning. There's not to say there isn't. I'm just saying that the symbolism and the imagery that people might pull from it unconsciously is maybe something not to read too much into. How do you, especially talking with them today, like when you're working with docents, working with people who are going to be speaking about your work, how do you kind of present that to them where, they might see something between the brushstrokes that isn't actually quite there. And it's like, where does that line kind of blend between like the viewer's interpretation versus like the artist's interpretation?
I think like one of the questions that they asked me is like if I care to like know what like people see, and I said that I didn't really care because the work to me is like something that is like personal to me, so I know what I have like put into it, and it might not be it might not have the same symbolism as like what they have, which is fine because I want them to see something in it, but I don't really need to know. Because also my story is it could be different from theirs. And so what I pull out of it is going to be different. So, and I don't expect anybody to also see what I see. Because our stories are different. And if they see it, then great. I don't even need to know that either. But if they don't see it and they see something else, I'm for it. You know?
With your works that are more land-based, where, I guess, when you are getting ready to paint one, is it something that comes strictly from your own head and what you're imagining, or is there a usually a point of inspiration? Is there an image? Is there something like that, or is it just like these kind of like you're pulling them kind of just from thin air, or are they your memories of places?
Like the Hill series, where like very like a literal interpretation of like kind of what a hill would be, just like this, you know. However, like the layers were a little like add the depth that I wanted. Whereas like I'll pull images of like flowers and stuff that I remember growing up with. And then I'll also like pull images of, I did a piece that was, when I did the Lakota Nations versus the United States, I was pulling a lot of imagery based off of the Black Hills. And so I've been working a lot with the composition of that hill. And then, like I said before, like I have pulled compositions directly from like pictures that I've taken like on travels and like back home as well. Sometimes it is just out of the blue.
You just spoke to it, but I did want to bring it up. You did the cover art for Lakota Nation versus the United States, a really, really remarkable documentary. Can you just talk to me how you were approached for that, like how that project came about?
They worked with Kirk Howe with the Carnes Center of American Indian Native Research Studies, which is they do curate shows in South Dakota that are art shows that are Lakota based, and they do a lot of art shows that are surrounding different traditions or stories or histories, and I was directed by that.
Were you approached for it, or did you like apply? Like how did it come about?
Yeah, they approached me.
Oh, that's gonna be like the biggest compliment.
Yeah, it's great because I was like, because sometimes when certain people like that or like licensing deals and stuff like that, I get approached by, then I'm like, do you know, like, have you seen my artwork? Is always like the first question that comes up. I think
it's an honest question.
Because sometimes like they'll think that like I'm not going to just create, you know, like something that isn't in my style or anything like that. Like if they are spoken to by my work, then I'm like, oh, then that's a huge sigh of relief. And they were. So, and they were really...
And they just let you go crazy? They just let you do it?
They actually like...
Or was there a directive?
We did. They kind of told me what the documentary was about. And then, so after that, I kind of sketched up, and like we did a series of sketches and stuff, and then I did a couple paintings just out of not really being asked, to just because I was really inspired by it.
Yeah.
And then they ended up going with an older piece of artwork.
Okay.
So which I kind of gave them like kind of what a whole catalog of what I've done in the past and stuff. So and what I was working on. So then they ended up just going into that direction, which was totally fine by me.
Yeah. If there was one or two things when somebody looks at your work, whether it's what's on view at the museum or, whatever, and wherever your art is showing, whether people are visiting you at your studio, insert location here, what do you want people to feel when they see your art?
I kind of wanted them to see like just the layers and how like every layer kind of builds onto each other, and creates this motion, and then from there they can kind of speculate what that motion is about, and what those layers are about. But I think like having those layers evident, I think just to showing the layers and layers and layers that I create on the canvas, and also just the motion, I think would be nice for people to see.
Yeah. When do you know that you're done with a work? Because I sat there and got to watch you work on a piece. What is that? What was that piece titled?
Oh, I don't have a title.
It's untitled. Oh my gosh. Very nice. Are you still working on it?
Titles are like the worst thing for me to like come up with. I'm not very good with words.
Yeah.
And I'm not very good with like, it takes me a while to write something and stuff like that. So even titles is just a little like, it's like just, I don't like titling.
That's okay. I don't like titling the things that I write. It's incredibly, like, I remember I wrote someone recently. It was like, I finally finished like it was a very lengthy process of finishing this story. And I showed it to my old roommates and I was like, here it is. And they're like, what's it called? And I was like, Lost Lightning? And they're just like, that kind of sucks. And I was I thought it was okay. I'm sorry. But titling is both daunting and also very humbling.
Yeah. And it's just a little overwhelming because they're going to be like, wow, that title sucks.
Yeah. But the work most certainly does not suck. It is so cool. And for anyone because I know this is an audio medium and you're not seeing this, if you go to the museum's YouTube channel, the video's titled Artists Uncorked, with Renelle White Buffalo. And in that video, Renelle's painting the work that we're talking about. But are you still working on that work?
Yeah, I'm still working on that one. I'm not sure when it will be done because I actually thought that it was almost completed. But I haven't collaged anything in there, and usually I use a collage element. Mm-hmm. And I haven't done that with that painting.
Yeah. How do you decide if a work is, I guess deserving feels like the wrong word, but going to like incorporate collage in some way?
I usually just do it because I feel like it adds a little bit more depth and interest, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so because I don't want my paintings to fall flat. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like it adds a little bit more dimension and interest. And then when it finishes, when I feel like it's finished, I'll work on like multiple paintings at a time, and then when I just stop going back to it, that's kind of when I know that it's finished.
When that chapter's over.
Yeah.
I have a few more questions, but thank you so much for doing this. I know it's been a bit of a crazy day with the docent tour and everything. But I guess one of my kind of closing questions, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, and I believe I asked you this during our interview that we did for the video. I like to ask all of the artists that I get to chat with this question. And I think I might have an idea of what your answer will be just because of everything we've talked about. But essentially, like, with the work that's on view at MAM, with any work that you create, it's eventually going to be elsewhere, whether that's in a museum, private collection, a gallery, et cetera, et cetera. It has to, I feel like there's so much work and time and love and effort that goes into these pieces, especially, ones that take many months, if not years of time and commitment. And I'm sure that there's meaning and meaning that you ascribe to it while you're creating it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to go off somewhere. Maybe you see it again, maybe you don't. Maybe you see it in 10 years, maybe you see it every once in a while. Once it's in that place, you could debate it, but there's a different meaning that it has once it's put like through that threshold and like on that wall somewhere else. And I guess when you get to see that work, let's just say for the context of here, when you see the work in NJ Arts Annual, does it feel different to look at, or is it the exact same?
It feels a little different just based on size. Sometimes when it looks on my studio wall or my in my house, and it looks a lot smaller, and then I'm like, wow, I could have made that bigger. But then or like, wow, that's like really big in the space. But that's kind of like the only like other thought that I have. I feel like it does have that same meaning, if not that meaningful. It's more meaningful, like, because I get to share that story. And so like, that's really important to me. So like I did a series with like my grandfather's paintings, kind of using those compositions.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime that I like was sharing those, or like if any, it was bought, especially when it was so personal,
Mm-hmm.
it made it even more personal, because I felt like it was awesome to see other people connect with it and connect with the story. So it even like it emphasizes it.
Yeah. I didn't realize your grandfather was a painter.
Yeah, or my great grandfather.
Your great grandfather. What did he paint?
More like stereotypical Western.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is kind of like, so I take those and and I kind of like abstract it and make it anti.
Yeah.
But it's awesome, and they're really like pure, and they're really like cute.
Yeah.
I want to know like what his thoughts are when he paints and stuff. So it's good to have that connection.
Yeah.
With him, even though I've never met him or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that.
Yeah. Well, Renelle,
Yeah.
thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it. Final question. I know I've kind of been throwing that we're near the end for a while, but can you just, I guess, provide context for somebody who, might be listening to this and say they're coming to the museum this weekend and they see your work. If you were a docent, like you just gave all of the docents their little pep talk, what would you want the lasting impact for someone viewing the work on view here at MAM to know when they see it?
That's a hard one. They have a hard job, I guess.
We try to throw softballs, but sometimes they come in a little hotter, I guess.
Yeah, I think like they should know, like, say that like I'm a Native American artist and this is a contemporary piece, because I think like sometimes people come into the context of knowing that Native American art is one thing. So for them to know that it's abstracted piece, but it might not be so stereotypical, is always a good reference point. And then also I kind of reference my family in that piece, a different story of like being at the powwow and stuff like that. And if they could like just tell that story, because I mean, everybody, it's a lot about my grandma as well. And everybody hopefully loves their grandma and is able to connect with that.
Well, Renelle, thank you so much. Where can people find you, connect with you, see your artwork? what avenues are there for that?
Yeah, definitely at the Montclair Art Museum for the New Jersey annual. And then the YouTube, of course. And then let's see. I'm on Instagram at Buffalo Roaming. And then if you look up rwhitebuffalo.com is my website.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Renelle. I really do appreciate it. This has been great.
Thanks.
All right. And that was our interview with Renelle White Buffalo. Thank you so much to Renelle for, being willing to sit down with me for, the time that we did. I appreciate it so very much. You could actually watch a video that we referenced a few times in the interview. It's called Artists Uncorked, and then just her name, Renelle White Buffalo. So Artists Uncorked, Renelle White Buffalo. It's available on our YouTube channel. You could probably also find the real version of it. It's the same video, just cropped for socials on our Instagram. We kind of dive into a lot of the same things that we expanded upon here in a very short window. So this is actually kind of an extension of that conversation. But yeah, you can check us out on Instagram, kind of like I noted. Our handle is Mam Montclair. That's M-A-M Montclair. We're on TikTok. You can just search the Montclair Art Museum. We're on YouTube. Same thing, the Montclair Art Museum. You can obviously, and I would say most importantly, visit us in person. We're open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You can buy tickets online. And yeah, I think that's about it. Please rate and review this episode wherever you are streaming this episode. Your interaction and engagement really does mean the world and helps us. We really love doing this, and getting to chat with artists and share those perspectives with you, the audience, is so important and so exciting, and we're thrilled that we get to do it. If you could just, rate and follow and review us, that just helps us be able to get those conversations to more people like you. So this has been Maybe Actually Museums Are For Me. Thank you so much. We'll see you next Wednesday.